The air in the room changes before a word is even spoken. It's a specific kind of cold, a vacuum where a person used to be. You're standing in your kitchen or perhaps sitting across from them in a car and you feel it, the withdrawal, the great pullback. To the modern world, this is a triggered avoidant. To you, it feels like a slow-motion execution of your emotional security. You watch their eyes glaze over. It's a shutters-down moment where the human being you thought you knew retreats into a fortress of silence. Your heart rate spikes. Your palms dampen. You are experiencing the attachment alarm, a biological siren that screams of impending abandonment. But here is the forensic truth that your favorite self-help gurus are too afraid to tell you. You aren't the victim of their coldness. You are the architect of it. You aren't a bystander in this collapse. You are the one who laid the explosive charges. I spent the better part of 3 months buried in Carl Jung's private correspondence from 1912. This was the era where his friendship with Freud was disintegrating into a bitter psychic war. I wanted to understand how two of the greatest minds in history could descend into such a petty, avoidant-anxious spiral. What I found in those yellowed letters wasn't a manual for healing. It was a warning about psychic cannibalism. It was a map of how we use the people we claim to love as dumping grounds for the parts of ourselves we've spent a lifetime trying to murder. Jung realized that when we cannot face our own internal coldness, we find someone else to wear it for us. Most people tell you that you are anxious because you care too much. I'm here to tell you that your anxiety is actually a form of masked aggression. It is a desperate totalitarian attempt to colonize another person's sovereignty because you have none of your own. You are a predator of intimacy hunting for a host because you are terrified of your own silence. Today, we dismantle the avoidant-anxious lie. We aren't looking for closure. We are performing a forensic audit of your shadow. Phase 1. The dismantle, the inferior function, and the void. In the standard narrative, the anxious, preoccupied individual is a wounded bird. The dismissive avoidant is a cold stone. This is a shallow, secondary summary. It satisfies the ego, but it solves nothing. If we look through the lens of the collected works of C.G. Jung, Volume 6, Psychological Types, a much darker architecture emerges. Jung speaks of the inferior function. This is the part of our personality that remains primitive, unadapted, and buried in the unconscious. For the anxious person, their inferior function is often self-sovereignty. They have no internal border. They are a land without a fence, constantly leaking energy, looking for a container to hold their chaotic emotional spill. I remember a specific case study in Jung's notes where he described a patient who felt empty unless someone was looking at her. This is the mirror trap. For the anxious person, the avoidant partner isn't just a lover. They are a walking manifestation of the self-sufficient shadow. You aren't attracted to their personality. In fact, you might find their hobbies boring or their conversation lacking. What you are attracted to is their ability to say no to the world, a skill you have amputated from yourself. You see their distance and you misinterpret it as strength. In reality, they are just as terrified as you are. But they have chosen the fortress while you have chosen the siege. The avoidant is a psychic refugee fleeing from the inferior function of the anxious partner. When you lean in, desperate for a hit of validation, you are asking them to do the work of your own soul. You are asking them to be the parent, the God, and the mirror all at once. According to Jung's Ion, researches into the phenomenology of the self, this projection is an involuntary alienation of the self. You have outsourced your existence. When the avoidant pulls away, they aren't rejecting you. They are rejecting the suffocating weight of the identity you've tried to force them to carry. They are trying to breathe, and you are the one taking all the oxygen. Phase 2. The biology of friction. Why them? Why now? Why does this specific person trigger a physiological response that feels like a heart attack? Why does the sound of their phone notification feel like a jolt of electricity to your nervous system? The University of California, Berkeley, published a series of findings on reactance and the scarcity of affect. They found that the human brain doesn't just want what it can't have. It biologically prioritizes unavailable stimuli as a survival mechanism. This is why the more they pull back, the more valuable they become in your distorted perception. In the frontier days of the American West, this was the logic of the scout. You don't watch the fire. You watch the darkness around the fire, because that is where the threat lives. Think of the relationship between Al Swearingen and Seth Bullock in the series Deadwood. Swearingen is the chaotic, emotional, manipulative center, the anxious force, trying to control every variable in the camp. He talks, he schemes, he occupies space. Bullock is the rigid, avoidant, simmering wall of silence. They are magnetically locked together, not because they like each other, but because they are the missing halves of a single, violent psyche. Swearingen needs Bullock's law to contain his chaos. Without the wall, the chaos would bleed out and die. But there is a cost to this magnetism. At the midway point of any anxious avoidant cycle, a biological pattern break occurs. In the anxious partner, cortisol levels don't just rise, they plateau at a level that would be toxic to a normal organism. You enter a state of high beta brainwave activity, a forensic state of hypervigilance. You are scanning their face for micro-expressions. You are checking the last seen status on a screen, like a forensic pathologist looking for a cause of death. You are looking for a reason to exist. Jung would call this a demonization of the object. You have turned a flawed, likely exhausted human being into a deity who holds the power of your oxygen supply. And the moment you do that, the avoidant, sensing the weight of your unlived life pressing down on their chest, has no choice but to run. They aren't fleeing you. They are fleeing the vacuum of your identity. Phase 3. The aggressor's veil. Stop. We need to have a moment of absolute uncomfortable clarity. If you are the anxious one in this dynamic, I want you to look at your actions through a different lens. For the next few minutes, we are stripping away your excuses. We are taking away the "I just love so much" defense. When you text them 3 times in a row after they haven't responded, that isn't connection. It's a demand for a receipt. It is a microaggression designed to force them to acknowledge your existence because you cannot acknowledge it yourself. You are holding them hostage in an emotional basement. I'll be honest with you. When I first mapped this out in the DL archives, I wanted to delete the data. It is much easier to believe that we are too loving than to realize we are too controlling. But the data doesn't lie. This is the principle of Enantiodromia, a concept Jung borrowed from Heraclitus and expanded in the Collected Works, Volume 7. It is the idea that any extreme force eventually turns into its opposite. Your extreme clinging isn't the opposite of their detachment. It is the cause of it. You are the one exercising totalitarian control. You want to know their thoughts, their location, and their emotional state at all times. In any other context, we would call this an invasion. In a relationship, we call it anxiety. The avoidant is often just a psychic refugee. They are fleeing a psychic invasion that they don't have the vocabulary to describe. They feel a heaviness in the air, a pressure in their throat. That pressure is your shadow, trying to crawl into their skin because you find your own skin too cold to live in. Does your love feel like a gift? Or does it feel like a debt they can never repay? Think of the biological reality of the Max Planck Institute's research on the pain matrix. When you are anxious, your brain is in a state of starvation. You are trying to eat their attention to stay alive. This is the definition of a parasite. Until you admit that your anxiety is a form of violence against the avoidant sovereignty, you will never be free. Phase 4, the architecture of the void. So how do we break the cycle? Most experts suggest communication. They tell you to use I statements and express your needs. They tell you to negotiate for more time. This is useless advice. You cannot communicate your way out of a shadow projection. You can only integrate your way out. You cannot ask the avoidant to stop being a wall. You must ask yourself why you are so afraid of the wall. In Jung's The Red Book, he chronicles his own journey into the desert of the self. He had to confront the fact that he was not just the wise professor, but also the murderous shadow. He realized that the thing he feared most, the silence, the isolation, the distance, was actually the source of his power. To stop the cycle, you must stop looking at the mirror and start becoming the glass. The solution is not to fix the relationship. The solution is to steal the coldness. You must take that avoidant trait, that ability to be alone, to be silent, to be unreachable, and you must house it within your own soul. You must become dismissive of your own internal demands for external validation. You need to develop what the Max Planck Institute calls self-referential stability. The ability to remain biologically regulated even when the other is absent. You must build an internal garrison. Imagine your psyche as a medieval fortress. Right now, your gates are wide open. You are begging the avoidant to come in and guard them. Integration means closing those gates and standing guard yourself. In the 1800s, frontier doctors used a technique called counter-irritation. To heal a deep internal inflammation, they would create a small, controlled irritation on the surface of the skin. Your avoidant partner is your counter-irritant. They are there to irritate you into self-awareness. They are showing you, through their absence, exactly where your own self-sovereignty is missing. Every time they pull away and you feel that surge of panic, that is a forensic marker. It is a GPS coordinate for a part of your soul that you have abandoned. Instead of chasing them, go to that coordinate, stand in the panic, inhabit the void. The cycle ends the moment you realize that the unworldly magnetism you feel for them is actually the gravity of your own repressed power. You don't need them to come closer. You need you to come home. Stop checking the phone. Stop analyzing the micro-expressions. Stop being the detective of the other and start being the architect of the self. You have been a tourist in their life because you are a stranger in your own. Carl Jung's final warning in The Undiscovered Self was that the individual who is not anchored in God can offer no resistance on his own resources to the physical and moral blandishments of the world. Replace God with self-sovereignty. If you aren't anchored in your own cold reality, you will always be a slave to someone else's warmth. You will spend your life shivering on their doorstep, begging for a scrap of attention that will never be enough to keep you warm. The mirror is broken. The forensic report is complete. You can keep chasing the shadow, or you can turn around and face the sun. But remember, facing the sun requires you to acknowledge that you have a shadow in the first place. It requires you to admit that the villain in your story might actually be the part of you that refuses to grow up. The avoidant didn't break you. They just revealed where you were already broken. Stop looking for the mirror, become the glass.